because we don't know how much time we have on this earth.
Yeah, that's very much true.
Right. So, and I strongly believe this, Audley. I believe that we all have specific gifts and skills that we've been blessed with to support each other and do good in the world. I truly believe that everyone, and some people might argue that my gifts and skills are very limited. My wife might tell you this, and I actually believe that. But whatever those few things are that I love doing and I feel like I'm really good at, I can use those for positivity. I know that, but what I don't know is how much time I have. And
welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson back with another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. If you didn't know, you now know that this is the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer. And I really appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us on our social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod, or you can head over to our YouTube channel and ring that bell, ding, 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 and that way you're connected to all great things Audacious related. So by all means, like, follow, subscribe, and share, and let's keep this thing going. I'm really excited to share this episode of the Audacious Living Podcast with you today, as I've got Bob DePasquale joining me to have a fabulous chat about impact and how we can all do so and have a positive impact by others simply by demonstrating a little generosity. Now, as a certified financial advisor, Bob works with generous families and helps them manage their wealth. Now, it could be financial or influential. Either way, he helps with that. Now, it's Bob's goal to really work. He wants his world to be a better place, as we all do. And so it's really important that he does this work. And while it may seem like Bob's world, it's centered around money when we talk about being generous, it's not. You don't have to have $1 million to make a difference in the lives of others. Bob also shares a powerful story from his personal life that really hits home the message of generosity. Plus, he also fills us in on the personal battle that he had with testicular cancer at a young age, an 18-year-old, to go through such a terrifying experience. But you'll hear about his lessons, what he learned from it, and how he's used that to make him put him in a better place. So really is a great chat with Bob. I really appreciate him being here. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Bob DePasquale. Enjoy. Greetings, Bob. Thank you for joining me here on the Audacious Living Podcast. I'm always appreciative of anyone wants to spend some time with me. So thank you for being here and hanging out, man.
Yeah, pumped to be here, Audley. I love the name of your podcast right away. I love the play on your name and everything. Awesome.
Thank you. I swear to you, it was merely by accident. It was pure coincidentalness that it. I'm not sure coincidentalness is a word, but it is now. It was pure coincidental that it happened that way. I'm like, oh, Audacious, let's do it. So there we go. But it does have significance and meaning from the standpoint of what I think is important as individuals, that we are bold and audacious in our actions and going out in the world, because it not only is that good for us, but it's good for the people around us too. So thank you.
Absolutely, my friend.
And so you would know a little bit about impact, because that's one of the areas that you spend a lot of time in, that you share with your audiences. You help people understand the significance of that. So maybe in our conversation, we can start on the power of impact.
Yeah, I would love to start there. That's probably my favorite word and favorite hashtag over the past couple of years, and it's a powerful force in my life. So yeah, I would love to dive in.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's start off with, how did you land on impact as being part of your brand?
I worked in the financial space for a large company for 12 years. Loved working there. A super charitable organization. And I would say in 3 or 4 different ways for those 12 years, the word impact was part of my work.
Okay.
And I probably didn't even realize it as much as I should have. But I realized about a year ago, my business partner and I left that organization, and nothing against them. I loved working there. I loved the people, awesome mission. We were just getting asked to do a couple different things that we just couldn't work on in that business model. And I realized when we decided to make this switch that the impact that the people that we worked with were making was probably the most important thing in the work that I did. It wasn't about your investments. It wasn't about your net worth, your budgeting. It wasn't about any of retirement planning, any of those things. All those things are super important. And we have the technical skills and knowledge. I'm a certified financial planner. My business partner is a certified private wealth advisor. So we know all the technical stuff. And if you want to talk about that, by all means, I can finance nerd out with the best of them. Love it. You might even see my book in the back here. I wrote a book about technology and how it relates to finance. But really, oddly, what was most important was the generous families that we were working with. And I was super surprised, actually. In my previous role, I worked in broadcast media. I worked in radio. I actually have a master's degree in broadcast journalism. And coming out of that career, I didn't think generosity was cool, or I didn't think it was prevalent in the world. But when I actually started talking with people about their money and their possessions, I realized that there's some really, really generous people out there. And when we made our transition, we realized, my business partner's name is Stacy. And I said, Stacy, we got to do something that's related to impact. And so you asked how it got to be part of my brand and part of my company. Well, that's exactly what it is. And we want to work with generous families and help them manage their wealth, whether it's financial, influential, or maybe it's skills. It's not necessarily about the money, but manage their wealth to make the world a better place and make positive impact.
And so great story, first and foremost. I love it. I mean, the background stuff is always, get insights on. So it's good that you were able to share that. The part about impact that's always stood out to me is, as much as we go out and we want to, whether it's say the kind word or do the right thing or positive impact someone's life in some way. It's how it's reciprocated to me, which is always nice. But there's a part of it, there's sometimes where we have an impact and we've got no clue. We've got no idea. I think of, if you were to ask someone, what was your, favorite teacher growing up, right? As a kid, they can pinpoint it was, Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, because they did this, they did that. And I bet you that teacher probably didn't even know, right? And so that's a part of it. When we talk about impact, that's the part that always stands out for me, which I love a lot.
Yeah, glad you brought that up. So first of all, my wife's a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And I'll tell you a story about exactly what you're saying here in a moment. But one of the greatest lines that I've ever heard before was by a guy by the name of Andrew Witt. And he was a guitarist, singer, songwriter, band, super talented musician. And he said, "You may not change the world, but you may change the world for one." And that hit me like a ton of bricks when I heard that a while back. And it's so true. And that a lot of times you may not even realize that one person or what you've done for that one person. And so the story related to my wife, she had a student, obviously she had many students over the years. This is her 15th year teaching. And a student reached out to her during the pandemic. I think it was probably a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago. Who even knows what's going on with this pandemic anymore? And I'm losing track of time, like probably a lot of people. And so the student reached out, and she hadn't heard from him in a while. Now, a lot of times when the student reach out, if it's one that she stayed in contact with, there's been some, terribly sad but uplifting stories with some students that she's kept in contact with over the years. But this one, she hadn't heard from at all. And she probably would have asked her, she would have said, "Oh yeah, he's doing fine." Well, he reaches out, and I don't know if it was the way he reached out or what he said. But he had sent her, I think it was a text. I'd have to ask her. Is it a text message or an email? Either way.
Bob, how many years have passed? What are we talking about here? Like 10 years or?
Yeah. It's one of her first students. So
okay.
About a decade.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the point was, it wasn't a phone call. It wasn't like he called her up and said, "Hey,
Right.
this is DePasquale." It was a text formatted message. And
Okay.
the way he worded it, she was kind of concerned. She's like, "Oh man, I got to call him, or I got to reach out to him because
Right.
something's wrong." Like, she was kind of worried that she had heard from him in a while. Well, he was 18 now. And
Wow.
that actually, so now here, I know exactly how long it was, because her kindergarten students were like 6 years old or 7 years old. And he was 18 because he was graduating high school.
Wow.
About 12 years. And he wanted her, he was allowed to a certain amount of tickets to graduation. Now, graduation is not in person now because it's during the pandemic.
Right.
But he said, "I was planning on giving you a ticket to my real graduation, but I want you to come to the virtual one." And he got back, they went back and forth, and he told her a couple stories about things that she did for him that changed his life when he was that age. And she never knew. And she probably never would have known unless he said to. But to your point, you may never know what you do for someone.
No, that's I mean, well, first of all, it's great you had that story to illustrate my point, but I mean, it is quite powerful because, again, and so when we talk about impact, we don't always know. It actually reminded me of another story I remember reading once, where it was a story of a young boy and his grandfather were walking along the beach, and and the wave would come ashore and wash up starfish, and every so often, the grandfather would take a starfish and chuck it back in the ocean, and the young boy said, "Hey, Grandpa, there's too many starfish, you're not going to get them all." And his point was, it mattered to that one that I threw back. And so, it does make a difference. And that's why, Bob, it's so important that we don't get dismayed in the fact that there's a big mountainous issue in front of us, because we can still take some form of action is really what the point is, right?
For sure. Sometimes those small steps are the ones that lead to the biggest triumphs, because it's the process. It's a journey, for sure.
Got you. So transitioning to the generosity, I want to sort of expand further on and how you're helping individuals or audiences sort of understand the impact of generosity.
Yeah, generosity to me is a powerful force in my life. So I have a story that I can share. I don't know how much time we have, but it's how generosity affects.
We'll go till the wheels fall off, Bob. We're good.
I was a cancer patient at 18.
Okay.
And anytime, if you've ever dealt with anyone who's had any form of cancer, a lot of times treatments can be very debilitating, and especially 20 years ago when I was sick. And
at a young age too, right? 18.
Yeah, I was 18. Now I didn't realize at the time of all the forces that were at play. It took me a couple of years to figure this out, but the shortest version of the story that I can give is, I was going back to New York. So I was born in New York, moved to Florida when I was 3. I thought it'd be really cool to go back to New York, to go to college, get closer with my family that most of them I didn't know very well. I had an opportunity to play football. So I thought I was this invincible 18-year-old. I don't know about you, Audley, but when I was 18, I thought nothing could take me down. I think a lot of people have been there. And,
sure, I can relate.
Yeah, I went from having what I thought was a minor groin injury. So, when you're a freshman and you're trying to prove yourself, you can't be hurt. You got to be during training camp. And this is back when we had 2 and 3 days, like when training camp was serious. I don't know about all you football players out there now with all the rules. I don't want to be the old get off my lawn type of guy, but let's just say training camp was more challenging back then. So there was a much more significant chance that you could pull a muscle and not recover because you're working so hard for 3-4 weeks. And so I would go to the training room, and a college training room is way different than a high school training room. 100 people in there on a given morning at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And my rehab exercise for my injured groin, at least we thought it was to shimmy across the training room, dodging people on this 3-wheeled stool.
Okay.
And I was getting pretty good at this, at least I thought. And at one point, the head trainer, a small guy, stood up on a box like in the middle of the room. And now it's really loud. Maybe it's just how I'm envisioning it, but it got really quiet. And he basically calls me out in front of the whole team, the head trainer. He's like, "Bobby," they called me Bobby back then. He's like, "You gotta," and he's cupping his hands. And he's like, you gotta get back out in the field. You're not hurt anymore. How long does it take to recover from a pulled groin muscle? Right. Now, I will say this: if you ever actually have pulled a groin muscle, it really is a pretty important muscle. I mean, you can't stand, sit, walk, no less shimmy on a stool. So I thought it was a groin. I mean, we would legitimate reason to think it was a groin injury. Anyway, I actually had a more serious conversation with him later that day. And I said, listen, Rick, something's actually wrong. He sent me to the doctor. I went through every series of tests you could possibly think there was, ultrasound, sonograms, everything, CAT scans. And I met with a doctor. Now I'm 18, so I'm an adult. I'm by myself going to these doctor's appointments. My parents were supposed to come up to see my first college game. Now we knew I wasn't going to play at this point.
Sure.
Right. But they were still coming up and they were going to stay at my uncle. We were all going to stay at my uncle's house and my mom's brother and have a good time.
Right.
Well, they called me the moment I got out of a doctor's appointment. It was just the timing. They were on their way up. They had just landed. And in this doctor's appointment, the doctor sat me down and said, Bobby, you have cancer. And I said, what? You got to be kidding me. Like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I just couldn't believe it. I didn't even think it was even possible. And the phone rings at the moment I get out of the appointment, right as I got out of the building. And my mom's like, hey, how'd the appointment go? And I'm like, well, let me tell you what happened. And I could just tell that she was distraught when I told her what it was. And my dad was in the back seat with her in this car on the way to my uncle's house. And you could hear him in the background, like, Susan, what's going on? What's going on? Like, he knew something was up too.
Right.
So we head back to my uncle's house. I met them there, shed a bunch of tears, said a few prayers, just didn't know what was going on. And a couple of days went by. Now it's Saturday. And that was when my first game was supposed to be. Now we knew I wasn't going to play in the game at this point.
Right.
So I was at my uncle's house. His best friend comes over. Now you talk about generosity. This was amazing. We've never met the guy before. And he comes in the house and he says, Bob and Susan, I can't imagine what's going on with you and your son right now. I have 3 young kids of my own. Here's my keys. Take my car for as long as you need it. We know that you have a bunch of doctor's appointments and treatments to go to. And he basically just gave my parents his car. Hasn't known them ever, never met them in his life, gives him the car.
Yeah.
Says to my uncle, hey, good seeing you. Have a great day. I'll talk to you later. He was there for maybe 15 minutes at the house.
Okay. Wow.
Gave his parents his car. So a few days go by. My oncologist at this point had said, you got to stay you got to at least take a few classes. Like, while you're going through these treatments, we don't know what we're doing yet. We don't know what's going on. We got more tests.
Right.
You got to keep your mind busy.
Don't stop your life.
Exactly. You got it, man. Exactly.
Right.
I think he actually used those words.
Okay.
And my newfound college life that was supposed to be, just starting. Yeah. I went to my first college class Monday morning, nothing, pretty normal.
Okay.
Took Tim's car around New York and to test and stuff. The next day, second ever college class. I come out of the class. I'm sitting in the cafeteria eating like a breakfast burrito or something. Okay. And you remember those televisions, like before we had flat screens like this, but it's like a tube television that was hanging from a bracket.
Yeah. Those are my lives. Those are our lives, right?
Exactly. It's like in the corner and the ceiling and the wall.
Yeah.
I'm watching the news. Mm-hmm. Now, back then we didn't have like smartphones where it was easy to get the news. So yeah, you probably still watch the news. Sure. But I didn't watch the news in New York. I'm watching it and I don't even know what channel it was, but all of a sudden a plane hits the Twin Towers live. And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. So I call my dad and we're talking for like less than a minute. And all of a sudden another plane comes around and hits the other Twin Tower.
Wow. Yeah.
And he's like, whoa, you better hightail it back to your uncle's house here. I don't know what's going on with the world. So I hopped in the car. Now I have a broadcast degree, a master's degree in broadcast journalism. And I will never spend 9 hours listening to AM radio again, but it took me 9 hours. Now, normally this is a 15-minute trip from my school to my uncle's house.
Right.
9 hours with the tower. Now I'm in New York and the towers are in the distance. I could see them burning and I'm listening. Yeah. It was the most amazing, crazy time in my life. Oddly, I got to my uncle's neighborhood. I ran out of gas in the neighborhood. Wow. We pushed my car, like not even knowing what's going on, and pushed my car into his driveway. We went inside the house and my aunt is hysterical because she can't get a hold of my uncle. He's not home yet. He was on business in Denver the night before, supposed to fly into New York. And we're all super nervous at this point. Finally, it's like, I don't know, 7 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock. I can't even remember. He calls and says, hey guys, I'm safe. I'm stuck in Denver. My flight was canceled. The phones have been out. I'll I'm going to try to get back tomorrow, but everything's okay. And we were like, okay, that's good. But then he said, you know what, though? Unfortunately, Tim, my best friend, was in the towers this morning and he died. And immediately, again, the mood just changed. And we're like, oh my goodness, this guy who had just come over displayed
generosity.
Yeah, displayed the greatest form of generosity I could ever experience, or that we've ever personally been received. It was terrible. So, needless to say, Tim passed away. My uncle's foundation was donated office space by Tim's organization, Cantor Fitzgerald. They're a pretty famous investment bank. Tim and a couple hundred other people were in the tower that morning, and they all perished. The one lady who was typically there that early, who worked for the foundation, she was actually never late, untypically late that morning. She was in the subway when it all happened and she escaped. So all the things that happened in that period of time were crazy. And I tell you that story oddly because that display of generosity that Tim provided for us, plus the catastrophic events, all came together at this crazy time. And I recovered mentally. I recovered physically in about 3 or 4 months. I mean, I went through some pretty serious treatments. My cancer ended up being testicular cancer. Okay. You might have been able to tell that by the groin injury. It spread to my lymph nodes and my abdomen, but I recovered from that. And in fact, I thought, though, at the time that I was going to be the best cancer patient I could ever possibly be. And I was going to kick cancer in the butt. And I did. But I didn't realize until later that Tim, that amazing display of generosity was not the only one in my life at that time. And it actually took me 2 years to work through all those emotions. Wow. Physically, mentally, I was fine. Emotionally, it took a couple of years.
Totally can understand that. And I mean, those events impacted. I mean, when you talk about that story, everyone it takes them back and they can think where they were, what they were experiencing, what they were going through. And so, I can absolutely relate in some levels to what you were essentially ground level, if you will, a lot closer than I was, but certainly I can relate and understand a little bit. The generosity of Tim as well. I think that speaks volumes. And I can see why, you would make generosity, part of your work now, because of how, you were impacted in that way as well too. So thank you for sharing that story, Bob. That's a powerful story. And especially the impacts that it had on you.
Yeah. And it really drives me to this day because we don't know how much time we have on this earth.
Yeah, that's very much true.
Right. So, and I strongly believe this, oddly. I believe that we all have specific gifts and skills that we've been blessed with to support each other and do good in the world. I truly believe that everyone, and, some people might argue that my gifts and skills are very limited. My wife might tell you this, and I actually believe that. But whatever those few things are that I love doing and I feel like I'm really good at, I can use those for positivity. I know that, but what I don't know is how much time I have. And the sense of urgency that experience about 20 years ago gave me is like nothing else. And I feel like it's so important to do that. And it's also important to spread that message so that as many of us as possible are using our gifts and skills for positive impact.
Yeah, the point around gifts and skills, I think, is an important one, especially when people talk about the fact that, their skills are limited. And I said, well, and my response would be, that's because you're comparing yourself to other people, right? We all have our own superpower, if you will, that, that we can use. And for some, it's really about uncovering it and discovering that. So I'm wondering, Bob, you sort of talk about that kind of process and figuring out what you got and what your power is. I think that's an important exercise for people to go through.
Definitely. And if you talk about the professional work that we do at Initiate Impact, my company, a lot of people in our financial space are used to seeing commercials and things about how to build your wealth and how to gain, get and gather so that you have enough money to prepare for retirement and all those different things. And I found out that what actually makes us unique is that we're less about gathering and more about giving. And generosity is an extremely powerful force in your life. And so we actually go through and work with people on that stuff first. We don't sit down and look at statements and investments. I mean, if there's a major issue, sure, we'll handle it. But we want to have those conversations first. And I think it's so important, oddly, that we actually take the time to consider what really is most important in our lives. What are the things that we are best at? What are the areas in the world, the people, the places that we can use our gifts and skills for benefit? And you remember, generosity, the great thing about generosity is you can't really measure it in size. And I mentioned earlier the quote about maybe not changing the world, but changing the world for one.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's really, really simple. Sometimes it can be very hard, but it's very, very simple to be generous. And that can be the greatest impact you'll ever make. And I heard this once. There's a couple of TED Talks about it. There's a lady by the name of Wendy Steele, and she's going to be on our podcast here shortly. And she's a brilliant woman. She's founded an organization that really helps women and other people use their gifts and skills. I mean, it's all about impact.
Sure.
And she talks about generosity. And in her TED Talk, you can look it up. It's probably like 10 years ago now, but it still holds up. She talks about how generosity is not just good for the benefactor. So absolutely, if I got $10 and I give it to someone who's hungry and can't eat and they can get food, most of us can understand that that's really good for them.
Yes.
But there's two other levels. Number one, some other people can also understand it's also good for the giver. It makes you feel good. There's some kind of bond between you and that person.
Yeah, the intrinsic kind of feel. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you've ever had an opportunity to serve or give something of yours to someone else, people will know that. But the other interesting fact behind this, and this is really what drives it home for me, and the reason why we can all make quite an effect in the world, is that it's been scientifically proven that the hormone oxytocin, now there's other hormones involved too with this too, but the hormone oxytocin, most people might know this, especially if you're a woman and you've given birth, that this is a hormone that's involved in triggering birth and labor and all those things, but it's also the bonding hormone. And it's why mother and child have an unbreakable bond that most people will never, that you can never understand, because oxytocin is the bonding hormone. And it has been proven that the oxytocin release between giver and receiver, and also, once again, the point that drives it home for me is anyone who experiences that. So if you see someone giving someone or being generous, you experience it one way or another, that third party also gets that oxytocin hit. And, I talked about the technical aspects of finance. I'm also not a psychologist, so I don't know too much about the technical aspects of this as well. I'm not a biologist either, but I do know that oxytocin is a very, very powerful force. And I've seen it and felt it change people's lives.
Well, it all makes sense. Even if you're a biologist or not, it certainly does make sense. And you think about just a general feeling that you have. And I'll think to myself, when I see someone, when I've witnessed this, how it makes me feel, right? The empathy kind of kicks in a little bit, and you start to think about that situation, that circumstance, how it's helped them. Oh wow, that person make that kind of gift. Good for them. Like all these sorts of feelings that you experience, and absolutely, I think it totally makes sense what you've said. And I'm not a scientist either, Bob.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. So I love working with people doing this and seeing their joy and their fulfillment. I mean, it's not always easy. I'm not sunshines and rainbows type of guy either. Like I do know that sometimes this work can be very challenging, but that's also what makes it so fulfilling. So I really appreciate you asking the question. I think generosity is an underutilized, underappreciated concept in our world.
Got you. I want to go back to your cancer experience and kind of going through that. Your young 18-year-old boy is still a young kid, right? And you're still, you're faced with this, an issue that's often seen as a big people's problem, right? And you've got it in front of you now, and you've got to respond. What was sort of things that help you sort of move through that, or what did you do to help you move through that?
Well, I mentioned that I was determined to be the best. It was like I was determined to be the best football player in college I ever was, right? Like that was the drive. And I think drive is really important in our lives, but sometimes we got to take a step back. So you mentioned like, what were the forces? So thinking about Tim and his act of generosity, for sure. My doctor told me the exact amount of water to the ounce to drink, when to go to bed, when to sleep, when not to sleep, how long, what to eat, what not to eat, all these different things that he told me to do. And I did them to the T, because like I said, I was going to be the best cancer patient I could possibly be. And I was healed physically and mentally, but emotionally, like I mentioned before, it took some time. And to answer your question, there were some amazing forces in my life that helped with these issues. I mentioned my uncle, my cousin Gunnar, he was on my podcast, gosh, man, a while back now. probably episode maybe 20 or so.
Okay.
We're in the hundreds now.
Nice.
And so he talked about how he used to wake me up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning to play video games.
Okay.
And I'd be like, why are you waking me up so early? Like, I'm sick. I'm a cancer patient. I got to sleep my 8 hours. Like the doctor said.
Right.
And I used to get frustrated with him, but he kept on doing it. And you know what? He was a kid. He's 10 years or so younger than me. So I was 18. He was like maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah.
So I just kind of dealt with it. Well, come to find out, I didn't even know this until our podcast. This is like 20 years after the fact. Come to find out that our parents were actually in cahoots and they encouraged this behavior. They're like, go wake him up, and I realized that bond that we formed from that period of time, because he was dealing with cystic fibrosis, a very, very challenging respiratory, autoimmune, that affects your reproductive system. I mean, he's just got major issues. Now the advanced, because of the foundation and everything, things are a lot better now, but he was struggling at that point in his life. And for us to kind of commiserate and celebrate the good things and have good times together, we really, really helped each other. And that's one of the forces that I didn't even realize at the time, that I'm so thankful for my cousin, even though he was my little cousin. What was he really doing for me?
Yeah. Right.
In a way, oddly, he kind of saved my life. My doctor, my oncologist was my other cousin, his sister, her friend from school's father ended up being my oncologist. And I never would have gotten him. I never would have, he was a very, very well-known doctor of oncology up there in New York. I never would have been able to be his patient. In fact, I was his youngest patient by like probably 40 years.
Wow.
And I was unique to him, but because of that relationship, I was able to be treated by him. And another crazy story that to kind of drive home the point on your, my answer to your question is, there were other things at play that I didn't know either. So my wife and I, we've been married now, it'll be going on 15 years. We got married in 2007. Okay. And, we have a great relationship. We actually met on this, through this mission organization, and a group of 5 of us became really, really close in this, during this 12-day trip that we were on. We never met each other before.
Okay.
And we spent a lot of time talking and kept in touch afterwards. I mean, to this day, we're all still friends. We're all grown and married and everything now, but we're all stay very, very close. Right. There were three ladies, and then one of them being my wife, and then me and our other friend, Mel. And we spent so much time talking that my wife and I eventually, the other girl kind of convinced us, is like, maybe you guys should be dating. So this was all long distance. We weren't close. We're talking. So one night we were having this conversation with each other. It's late at night, probably. Yeah. And we were talking about this time, and she knew that I had this cancer story. She heard a lot about it, but she was asking me more questions about it. I was going into detail.
Yep.
And she's a couple of years younger than me. And so she was telling me this story about when she was in high school, and she had this teacher, really, really nice guy. And he said in the beginning of class, the semester one year, he said, "Hey class, welcome to whatever, just thanks for being here. One of the things that I like to do in my classes is periodically I like to have prayer time in the morning before we start class. And what we're going to concentrate on this year is we're going to pray for our future spouses. And we're all going to do this periodically. And now if you're like a 15-year-old girl or 16-year-old boy, whatever, you're like a teenage, you're not, praying for your future spouse, like you're not thinking that far ahead. Like
seriously, yeah.
that's like kind of stupid, to be honest with you, the way you might think about it. Well, anyway, so she told me this story and figured out, throughout the semester that they actually did this. And she was kind of reluctant, but she's like, you know what? No, this is the teacher said, and it can't hurt. So I'm going to do it. Well, we went back and we were talking that night, and we thought about this, and we went back and did the math. Well, when she was a junior in her fall semester of her junior year of high school, I was a freshman in college. And that's exactly when I was diagnosed and was going through my treatments.
She was praying for you.
And we were like talk about like mind explosion moment. She didn't even know me. She didn't even know who I was.
No. But you talk about forces at play and things to help us get through moments. And I think you really gave really 2 strong examples. Like, we have people who are in our world who, regardless of their age, whether it's your 8-year-old cousin or, grown adult, that are there for you and I can provide support. And so we all get, so what really I'm hearing there is the importance of having that support network absolutely is key in whatever challenge that we're going through. And then there's the unseen stuff, the things that we don't know about, things that are happening around us that are pointing us and supporting us, that are just there because that's kind of, quote unquote, the universe is intended for us. And so I'm hearing both of those, and they both come into play, and they're really important. So I thank you for sharing that. But yeah, that's mind blowing. Yeah, your future spouse you're praying for, right?
Oh, it was crazy. I was like, what? Are you serious? Like that was one of those moments that you'll just never forget in life. And it doesn't matter how many times we tell that story to people. People ask us about our story. It was powerful. And you're absolutely right. I love the way you tied that together too. I mean, there are some things that we can absolutely recognize, and there's some things that we can't.
Right.
But acts of generosity, kindness, support, they all happen in community, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk out there about self-care and taking care of oneself. And I absolutely believe that. I mean, I love fitness. I've had a serious disease in my life. So I've always dedicated myself to really taking care of myself. I'm trying to be more mindful, take time for gratefulness. And so I do believe in those things, but there's a lot of talk about doing stuff for yourself first. And as long as you're healthy and taking care of yourself physically and mentally, I think the most powerful force is expressing generosity. And it's really hard to be generous. You could say, oh, I'm going to go buy myself a gift. You're being generous to yourself, but that's not really generosity in its truest form. Generosity is about giving something up. And that's beyond, I mean, I cannot tell you the power of that. And that happens when within relationships and in community. So yes, you got to have that support system, whether you know that they're there or not. You got to have them.
Right. It's interesting. And you bring up self-care. I mean, it's very much possible that you can do both. You can care for yourself and care for others at the same time as well, too, as opposed to what I find as the late conversation around self-care means putting yourself first at all costs. And I think both can happen concurrently.
Absolutely. They're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
It's not like you can't be to execute self-care and be selfless at the same time.
Correct.
And the main point behind that, I already mentioned, is that humans are designed to be generous and care for others. We talked about oxytocin. So part of self-care, in my humble, non-scientific opinion, or somewhat scientific, but not professionally trained opinion, is that giving makes you feel really good. So that is ultimately self-care.
Absolutely.
And for the umpteenth time, I feel like I've been saying this a lot recently, not just on your show here, but giving is not just about monetary things.
No.
Right. You don't have to have $100 million to give.
No.
You don't have to. You don't even have to have any money to give. In fact, I'll save you another 20-minute story. But one of the chapters in my book is about how an indigenous Mayan community expresses love. And you talk about giving. That is the way that many cultures, because we think in America, because we're known for being financially generous, we give away more money, we have more charities.
Sure.
We should keep doing that because we have a lot of wealth. But some of the ways that these other cultures give is really, really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I even think of the biblical story where the young boy gave, 2 fish and loaves and fed, that was used for a miracle. So, I mean, you don't, so to your point, you don't have to have a lot to give, right? You don't. You can give what you have. And then I think if you're doing it wholeheartedly, genuinely, authentically for the benefit of someone else, that can be used in all sorts of ways, and probably in ways that we never even thought imaginable. So there's some great benefit in that.
Absolutely, man. You don't even know. And the story of my wife and her student was a perfect example.
Yeah.
She probably thought she was just doing her job, and she likes to be generous to her students too, but she found out 10 years later that she really made it. In fact, got a tough time for him in life. So you never know.
Yeah, you never do. And that's why, we should be kind and be mindful, especially in this era where, we have no idea what people are going through, what their experiences are. We certainly know that there's a lot more mental health challenges, more so now than at any point. So while we can look at someone and judge and make, come to our own conclusion as to what their situation is, we truly don't know. And so that's what we have to be mindful of.
Yeah, completely agree. And
Yeah.
being mindful of other people is a way of kind of fulfilling your purpose. I think being compassionate is important.
Got you. I want to touch on. I've heard you reference, living in fulfillment. In fact, I think when you first reached out to me, that was one of the things you referenced, and I love that because fulfillment, as we just sort of talked about generosity, it can happen through what we do for ourselves, or it can happen through how we impact others. Right?
Yes, for sure. And over the years, I've had an opportunity to work with some pretty influential people, and they spend a lot of time. They're driven people trying to get something done, usually within a business, a family business, or something that it's probably very, very profitable. And there's some kind of shift somewhere along the line when they become less nervous and worried about their business surviving or their family legacy influence surviving. And they get to a point where they want what they have to survive. And I don't mean for them, but they want what they have to survive for the rest of the world and for other people, for it to leave that legacy and be lasting. And so doing that work is super fulfilling. And I probably seem like a broken record, but it's really fulfilling to see other people experiencing fulfillment. And that's the number one thing. I mean, I've never, honestly, in 13 years now of working with people's finances, oddly, I've never, absolutely never had one person come to me and say, Bob, thank you so much for getting me 8% returns on my retirement account. Right. No one ever has said that. And I've worked with thousands, literally thousands of families over the years and never heard that. But I've heard an uncountable amount of times, I've heard people say, Bob, thank you so much for helping me and my family find what's most meaningful. Yeah. And they've said it in multiple ways, whether it's written, I've gotten letters, sure. I've been at events, I've gotten big hugs from people thanking me. I love it. I've had the next generation. So I've had children thanking me for helping their parents age gracefully and in some cases pass on feeling fulfillment, knowing that they've accomplished what they were set to do. It's just really an amazing feeling.
Yeah, Bob, there's no question that you found your lane and found your own purpose, and through that, you're having major impact. So congratulations, because the work that you're doing, it's awesome, and what you're doing. Again, the ability to impact now generations, that's phenomenal. So congratulations, man.
Oh, thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Congratulations to you too, by the way, for getting your message out on your show. I think a lot of people don't realize the work that it goes into. I said earlier that generosity is pretty simple usually, right? But it's not always that easy. So sharing these conversations, I know takes a lot of work, but you're making a difference for sure too. So we can celebrate together.
There we go. We absolutely will. And even when I go back to sort of the origin of this podcast as an example, it was really very much about, what can we do to give back? And, it was during the time when, during the pandemic when this thing started, and I really felt that more so than ever before, we needed to have a message of encouragement while at the same time, having people live this bold, audacious life. Because I truly think that, when you can do that, the impacts you have, not again, as I said earlier, not only for yourselves, but what we can do for other people. And much like with your work and from the spirit of generosity, it's yes, you're impacting other people, yourself, but you got third parties that are watching now too, right?
Oh yeah, man. I can't tell. Oh, that's a really, really great feeling. In fact, I've been to some events, some either service events or charitable fundraiser type of events, and met some people who came because they were invited or given a free ticket or something. Yep. And I love talking to those people because they see the generosity and the desire to help that the other people have, and it's really inspiring. It's really cool.
Awesome. Well, Bob, listen, I've super appreciated this chat. Super appreciated having you on and sharing this fashion. You mentioned your podcast, so let's start there. Let's give an opportunity for you to share your podcast. Tell our audience what it's about, what you're focused on, and where they can find you.
Yes. Best place you can find me is bobdepasquale.com. It's very simple. And all of my social links are there. My podcast, my blog, a way to get in touch with me. Those are the best ways. I'm most active on Instagram and Twitter at bdepa, BDEPA. And you can find the book, you can find the social links. You can also find my company. If you're interested in working with us on a professional level, talking about generosity, then that's initiateimpact.com.
Got you. Very awesome. Again, congratulations, Bob. Again, I can't say enough how important it is to find our purpose and to land on that space where we know we're, and we talk about our gifts, right? We found our purpose by using our gifts, but not that we're keeping them to ourselves, right? We're using our gifts and we're spreading them, we're sharing them, we're disseminating them any way possible. And again, when we talk about impacts, right? That's how you impact the world, by using the gifts, using things that were meant for you to share with others. So again, congratulations, Bob.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. Let's all go out there and make an impact.
Awesome. We'll see you soon. Take care, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I really want to send out my appreciation and thanks to Bob for being here and sharing his perspective on the importance of impact and how each of us can impact others through our own generosity. And again, it's not about money, and I think that's a really, really important point that we walk away with. It's something that's within our grasp, something we all can do, and we all can make a difference to others. So again, thanks, Bob, for being here. I really appreciate it. You know, when I reflect on my conversation with Bob, he left us with so many great points, but if there's just one thing that I take from my chat with him, it would be this. Giving solely for the purpose of being a blessing to others can have a profound impact on both the giver and receiver. Studies attest to the fact that the benefits of giving, not just for the recipients, but the giver's health and their happiness, and for the strength of our overall communities. You know, giving doesn't have to take place in the form of monetary exchange, as it can occur through the donation of our time, whether we be volunteering for organizations that do charitable work, or giving our time to individuals. Maybe you're volunteering in a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter. All of those things do make a difference. Giving has a way of generally making us feel happier and can invoke feelings of gratitude while contributing to the overall health and well-being. So it's really, really significant. If you're seeking ways to leave a mark in the world and have the biggest impact, extending a hand of generosity is by far the most effective and audacious way of doing it. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com and entering your email address, and you'll be alerted every time there's brand new content that comes out. We've sadly reached the end of another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, and as always, I send out a shout out and thanks to our amazing listeners, all those lovers of audaciousness. I really appreciate your tremendous and ongoing support, and I say thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.